I need to tell you about a morning in October 2001 when a man made a decision that would cost him everything he had built in 23 years. Amos Beiler stood in his barn in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, holding a syringe the government veterinarian had just handed him. The vet was waiting. The Gmay was watching. Amos set the syringe down on the workbench and walked out into the cold. That was the last time Dr. Morrison came to his farm voluntarily. It would be 3 years before he came back, and when he did, he would be holding a piece of paper that changed everything the county thought it knew about disease. What Amos did not know that morning was that his father had left him something more valuable than land. It was written in pencil in the margins of an old book, and it would take him 2 years to understand what it meant. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the system that governed every dairy farm in Lancaster County in 2001, because you need to understand what Amos was refusing. The Pennsylvania Dairy Cooperative had required vaccination for bovine viral diarrhea since 1997, backed by county health board enforcement. Every herd, every year, no exceptions. The protocol was printed on a card that hung in every barn office from Intercourse to Strasburg. Farmers who complied received a certificate with a green stamp. Farmers who refused received a visit from the county health board and risked losing their cooperative membership. By the year 2000, 94% of dairy herds in Pennsylvania carried that green stamp. The system was not debated. The system was farming. Amos Beiler did not carry that stamp. He had 32 head of Holstein on 47 acres his father had bought in 1956. The land was good. The water was clean. The herd produced 6,800 pounds of milk per cow per year, which was 1,100 pounds below the county average, but enough to feed his family and pay the property tax without borrowing. He did not owe the bank. He did not owe the feed supplier. He did not owe anyone except God and the Gmay. That was the way his father had taught him. That was the way he intended to die. When Dr. Morrison first came in the spring of 1998, Amos had agreed to the vaccination. He did not understand what was in the syringe, but the vet said it was required, and the bishop had not objected. The herd was vaccinated. The certificate was issued. Amos hung it on the nail above the door, where the state inspector could see it during the quarterly milk inspection. The following spring, 3 cows aborted in the same week. Amos called Dr. Morrison. The vet came out, examined the cows, took samples, and said it was probably stress. Amos asked what kind of stress. Dr. Morrison said sometimes it just happens. He recommended another round of vaccination to be safe. Amos asked if the vaccine could have caused it. Dr. Morrison said no. The vaccine prevents disease. It does not cause it. Amos did not argue. He thanked the vet and watched him drive away in his white truck with the government plates. That night, Amos sat at the kitchen table with a pencil and a piece of paper. He did not write in English. He wrote in the old script his father had taught him, the same script his grandfather had used to record the weather and the harvest and the price of feed for 60 years. He wrote down the date of the vaccination. He wrote down the date of the abortions. He wrote down the number of days between them. 14 days. He folded the paper and put it in the back of his father's Bible, the one with the cracked leather cover and the notes in pencil along the margins. The next spring, when Dr. Morrison came with the syringe, Amos said he would not be vaccinating this year. Dr. Morrison set his bag down. He asked why. Amos said he had been thinking about it, and he did not believe it was necessary. Dr. Morrison said it was not about belief, it was about compliance. The USDA required it. Amos said he understood that, but he was refusing. Dr. Morrison asked if Amos understood the consequences. Amos said he did. Doctor, Morrison picked up his bag and left. He did not say goodbye. Within a week, the Gmay knew. Someone at the feed store had heard it from someone at the co-op who had heard it from Dr. Morrison's assistant. By the time the story reached the Sunday service, it had grown. Some said Amos was refusing all veterinary care. Some said he was treating his herd with herbs like the English hippies over in Berks County. Some said he had been reading books that were not approved by the bishop. None of it was true, but none of it mattered. What mattered was that Amos Beiler had refused the government, and refusal made the whole community vulnerable. The bishop did not call for Meidung. He called for caution. He said the Gmay would watch and wait. The Ordnung, the unwritten rules that governed plain life, said nothing specific about vaccination, but it said everything about protecting the community from outside judgment. If Amos's herd stayed healthy, the matter would be dropped. If disease came, Amos would bear the responsibility alone. No one would help him. No one would buy his milk. No one would attend his auction if he had to sell. The Gmay had spoken. Amos heard this from his wife, Sarah, who had heard it from the women after the service. He did not go to the next service. He stayed home and milked the cows and cleaned the barn and repaired the fence line along the eastern pasture where the posts had rotted through. He did not defend himself. He did not explain his reasoning. The decision had been made. The rest was up to the land and the herd and God. Sarah came to him that evening while he was washing the milking equipment. She asked him if he was certain. He said, yeah, he was certain. She asked what would happen if the bishop was right. He said then they would lose everything. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good, at least we will lose it together." She went back to the house. Now let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever refused something everyone said would save you and been called reckless for it? Have you ever stood alone in a room full of people who loved you and heard them say you were putting everyone at risk? That was what Amos felt every Sunday he stayed home. That was what Sarah felt every time she went to market and the other women turned away. Let me tell you about herd immunity, because this is the key to everything Amos learned in those 3 years. Herd immunity is not about individual animals. It is about the percentage of a population that carries antibodies to a disease. When that percentage rises above a certain threshold, the disease cannot spread. It dies out. The threshold for bovine viral diarrhea is approximately 70%. That means 70% of the herd must have antibodies, either from vaccination or from surviving natural infection. The Pennsylvania Dairy Cooperative Protocol assumed that vaccination was the only reliable way to reach that threshold. What they did not account for was the possibility that a herd could reach that threshold naturally, through low-level exposure to the virus from neighboring herds and shared water sources over time. building immunity without ever showing symptoms severe enough to require treatment. Amos did not know any of this in 2001. He only knew that his cows had aborted after the vaccination, and that they had not aborted before it. He did not have the language to explain what he suspected. He only had the dates written in pencil in the back of his father's Bible. The first year without vaccination, the herd stayed healthy. No abortions, no respiratory disease, no diarrhea. Milk production held steady at 6,800 pounds per cow. Amos did not celebrate. He simply continued. He rotated the pastures every 14 days, moving the herd before the grass was grazed below 3 inches, the way his father had taught him. He cleaned the water troughs every morning, scrubbing them with a stiff brush and refilling them from the spring that fed the upper pasture. He composted the manure in a pile behind the barn, turning it every 3 weeks until it was dark and crumbly and smelled like earth instead of waste. He spread it in the fall after the corn was cut, working it into the soil before the first frost. He did what his father had done, and his grandfather before him. He did not read books about soil health or microbial diversity. He simply watched the land and listened to what it told him. The second year, 2 calves were born weak. One died within a day. The other recovered after a week. Amos did not call Dr. Morrison. He treated the calf with colostrum from the healthiest cow in the herd, the big Holstein with the white blaze on her forehead that had never missed a milking in 6 years. He fed the calf by hand every 4 hours, holding the bottle steady while it sucked, watching its eyes for signs of strength returning. It took 5 days before the calf could stand without wobbling. It took 7 before it would nurse on its own. The calf survived. Milk production that year rose to 7,100 pounds per cow. Amos wrote the number in the back of the Bible. The third year, nothing happened. No disease, no abortions, no weak calves. Milk production reached 7,400 pounds per cow, 600 pounds above where it had been in 1998 when the herd was vaccinated. Amos did not tell anyone. He simply milked the cows and repaired the barn roof where the shingles had blown off during the January wind, and planted the corn in May when the soil was warm enough to crumble in his hand. In the spring of 2004, the outbreak began. It started 3 townships east on a farm that bordered the highway. A herd of 80 Holsteins, all vaccinated, all certified. Within 2 weeks, 12 cows had aborted. Within a month, the entire herd was infected. The farmer called Dr. Morrison. Dr. Morrison called the USDA. The USDA sent a team from Harrisburg. They tested the herd. They tested the water. They tested the feed. They found bovine viral diarrhea, but it was not the strain the vaccine protected against. It was a mutation, a variant, something the protocol had not anticipated. The USDA issued an alert. All herds within a 15-mile radius were to be tested. Any herd showing signs of infection would be quarantined. Any herd that could not prove immunity would be vaccinated immediately with an updated formula. The county moved fast. Within 3 weeks, 42 herds had been tested. 37 showed signs of exposure. 18 showed active infection. The variant was spreading. Dr. Morrison came to Amos's farm on a Thursday morning in late April. He did not come alone. He brought an assistant and a state inspector. They parked in the driveway and walked to the barn without knocking on the house door. Amos was inside, Milking. He heard the truck. He finished milking the cow he was working on, hung the bucket on the post, and walked out to meet them. Dr. Morrison said they were there to test the herd. Amos asked why. Dr. Morrison said there had been an outbreak and the county was testing everyone. Amos asked if he had a choice. Dr. Morrison said no. Amos stepped aside and let them in. They tested all 32 head. They drew blood from the jugular, labeled the vials, and loaded them into a cooler in the back of the truck. Dr. Morrison said the results would be ready in 5 days. If the herd tested positive for active infection, it would be quarantined. If it tested negative but showed no antibodies, Amos would be required to vaccinate with the updated formula within 14 days, or the herd would be seized and destroyed under emergency health provisions. Dr. Morrison did not look at Amos when he said this. He looked at his clipboard. Then he got in the truck and left. Sarah asked Amos what he was going to do. He said he did not know yet. She asked what the book said. He went to the shelf and took down his father's Bible. He opened it to the back and unfolded the paper where he had written the dates. He showed her the numbers. She read them slowly. She asked what it meant. He said he thought it meant the cows had built their own immunity. She asked if he was sure. He said no, but he said he believed it. She did not say anything else. She went back to the kitchen and started preparing the evening meal. The results came back on Tuesday. Dr. Morrison called. He said the herd had tested negative for active infection. He said that was the good news. The bad news was that antibody levels were inconsistent. Some cows showed high levels. Some showed moderate. Some showed almost none. Under the emergency protocol, inconsistent immunity was treated the same as no immunity. Amos would need to vaccinate within 14 days. Amos said he would not be doing that. There was a long silence on the phone. Then Dr. Morrison said Amos needed to understand what he was risking. If the variant reached his herd and spread to neighboring farms, Amos would be held liable. The county could seize his assets. The Gmay could not protect him from a federal health order. Amos said he understood. Dr. Morrison said he would file the refusal with the state. Someone from Harrisburg would be in touch. Then he hung up. The Gmay met that Sunday. The bishop stood before the congregation and said that Amos Beiler had refused the government order. He said the Gmay had tried to be patient, but patience had limits. He said that if disease came to Amos's farm and spread beyond it, the entire community would suffer. He said the Gmay could not allow one man's pride to endanger everyone. He did not call for full Meidung. He called for separation. No one was to buy Amos's milk. No one was to sell him feed. No one was to visit his farm or speak to him at market. The separation would last until Amos complied or until his herd was destroyed. The Gmay had spoken. Amos did not attend that service. He was at home, walking the fence line, checking for breaks. Sarah attended. She heard the bishop's words. She came home and told Amos. He nodded. He did not say anything. He went back to the barn and finished the evening milking. Let me tell you about the 1984 outbreak, because without it, what happened next makes no sense. In 1984, a similar variant of bovine viral diarrhea swept through the Midwest. It killed thousands of cattle. It bankrupted hundreds of farms. The USDA responded by mandating a national vaccination program. The program was based on the assumption that universal vaccination would eliminate the disease. It did not. The disease adapted. It mutated. By 1990, there were 3 known variants. By 2000, there were 7. Each time a new variant appeared, the USDA updated the vaccine. Each time the vaccine was updated, the virus adapted again. The system was chasing the disease. The disease was always one step. What the USDA did not study was the small number of herds that had survived the 1984 outbreak without vaccination. These herds did not fit the protocol. These herds had been exposed to the virus naturally. They had lost animals. They had suffered. But the animals that survived carried antibodies to multiple strains, not just the one in the vaccine. Their immunity was broader. It was slower to develop, but it was more durable. The USDA did not collect data on these herds because they were considered outliers. They were statistically insignificant. Amos's father had been one of those farmers. In the back of the Bible, beneath the dates Amos had written, there was a note in his father's handwriting. It was in the old script. It said, "The cows that live through the fire are the ones that remember the heat." Amos had read that note 100 times. He had never understood it until now. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Amos milked the cows. He sold the milk to a small organic co-op in Berks County that did not ask questions. He bought feed from a Mennonite supplier in Lebanon County who had not heard about the separation. He did not go to market. He did not go to church. He stayed on the farm and waited. On the 14th day, Dr. Morrison came back. He brought the state inspector and a sheriff's deputy. They parked in the driveway and walked to the barn. Amos was inside, repairing a stall door. He heard the truck. He set down his hammer and walked out to meet them. Dr. Morrison said the 14 days were up. He said Amos had one more chance to comply. If he refused, the herd would be seized under emergency health provisions and transported to a quarantine facility in Harrisburg, where it would be tested and, if necessary, destroyed. Amos asked what would happen if the herd tested clean. "Doctor," Morrison said, "that was not the point. The point was compliance." Amos said he would not be vaccinating. Dr. Morrison looked at the inspector. The inspector looked at the deputy. The deputy asked Amos if he understood he was violating a federal health order. Amos said he understood. The deputy said they would be back in 72 hours with a transport truck. They left. Sarah came out of the house. She asked Amos what he was going to do. He said he did not know. She asked, what if he was wrong? He said then he would lose everything. She asked if he believed he was right. He said he believed the cows knew something the government did not. She asked what that was. He said he did not have the words for it yet. She went back inside. That night, Amos sat at the kitchen table with the Bible open in front of him. He read his father's note again. He read the dates he had written. He read the numbers. Then he took a pencil and wrote one more line. "If I am wrong, forgive me. If I am right, let the land speak." The next morning he walked out to the barn before dawn. The cows were waiting. He milked them one by one, the way he always did, starting with the oldest and ending with the youngest. When he finished, he poured the milk into the bulk tank and cleaned the equipment and swept the floor. Then he sat down on the bench outside the barn and waited for the sun to come up. At 8 o'clock, a truck pulled into the driveway. It was not the transport truck. It was Dr. Morrison's white truck with the government plates. He got out alone. He walked to the barn. He was carrying a folder. He stopped in front of Amos and opened the folder. Inside were lab results. He handed them to Amos. Amos looked at the paper. He could not read most of the words. They were medical terms. But he could read the numbers. The numbers said his herd had antibodies to 4 different strains of bovine viral diarrhea. The numbers said the antibody levels were higher than the county average for vaccinated herds. The numbers said his herd had natural immunity. And there was one more line at the bottom. Antibodies detected for BVD type 1b, a strain that had not been documented in Pennsylvania since 1952. Dr. Morrison said this was unusual. He said he had sent the results to a research team at Penn State. They wanted to study Amos's herd. They wanted to understand how it had developed immunity without vaccination. He said the USDA was suspending the seizure order pending further investigation. He said Amos's herd would remain on the farm. Amos handed the paper back. He asked if that meant he was in compliance. Dr. Morrison said no. It meant he was an exception. Amos asked what the difference was. Dr. Morrison did not answer. He put the folder under his arm and walked back to his truck. Before he got in, he turned around. He said Amos had been lucky. Amos said it was not luck. Dr. Morrison got in the truck and drove away. Asking Dr. Morrison to endorse refusing vaccines was like asking a carpenter to endorse buildings without nails. His livelihood depended on the very tool that Amos had abandoned. The outbreak burned itself out by June. 41 herds in Lancaster County had been infected. 19 had lost more than 30% of their animals. 7 had been destroyed entirely. The economic damage was estimated at $4.2 million. The USDA updated the vaccine again. The county issued new compliance requirements. Life went back to normal. Except for Amos. The Gmay lifted the separation in July. The bishop did not apologize. He simply announced that Amos Beiler's herd had been cleared by the state and that normal relations could resume. No one spoke of it again. Amos went back to church. Sarah went back to market. The farm continued, but something had changed. Farmers from other districts started coming to Amos's farm. They did not come in groups. They came alone, in the early morning or late evening when no one would see. They asked questions. They asked what Amos had done. They asked how the cows had survived. Amos showed them what his father had written in the margins of the Bible. He showed them the dates he had recorded. He told them about rotating the pastures every 14 days, so the cows were never on the same ground long enough for the virus to concentrate. He told them about cleaning the water troughs every morning before dawn, because standing water carried disease. He told them about feeding colostrum from the healthiest cows to every newborn calf within the first hour of life, because that was when immunity transferred. He told them he had trusted the land and the herd to do what they had done for 10,000 years before vaccines existed. Most of them left confused. A few of them left thinking. Some of them left and began keeping their own records in the margins of their own books. By 2007, 12 farms in Lancaster County were managing their herds without vaccination. By 2010, that number had grown to 34. The USDA did not acknowledge them. The county did not track them. But they existed. They were farming the way Amos's father had farmed and his grandfather before him. They were letting the land speak. Amos Beiler farmed without vaccination until 2019. 32 head became 41. 41 became 53. Milk production averaged 7,600 pounds per cow over 18 years. That was 900 pounds above the county average for vaccinated herds over the same period. His veterinary costs averaged $340 per year. The county average was $4,200. He never borrowed money. He never carried debt. He paid his taxes in full every year and donated 10% of his income to the Gmay Mutual Aid Fund. This outcome was specific to Amos's herd under his specific conditions and management practices. It is not a recommendation for or against vaccination. Every farmer must work with their own veterinarian to make decisions appropriate for their land, their herd, and their circumstances. In 2019, he sold the herd to his son Jacob, who continues to farm the same way. The Bible is still on the shelf in the barn office. The notes are still in the back, written in pencil in the old script. Jacob has added his own notes beneath his father's. The dates, the numbers, the weather, the price of feed, the things that matter. Names and certain details in this story have been changed to protect the privacy of the individuals and their community. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing a man can do is comply. Sometimes the protocol designed to protect everyone is the thing that makes everyone vulnerable. And sometimes, a herd that survives the fire is the only herd that remembers the heat. Amos refused the syringe. He lost his community. 3 years later, his herd was the only one standing. The land spoke. If someone in your family ever refused what everyone said was necessary and turned out to be right, tell me about them in the comments. This is the Plain and Simple Farm.